say, seriously, it's humorous, but seriously, I ask you not to watch the following video unless two things, one of two things, or both. If, in the unlikely chance that you've watched one of the hundreds of earlier videos from me on cycling over the last 6 years, and it all been influenced by it, and I hope you weren't. But if you have been, then you should watch this, because they were in error, and now I'm at least in the right ballpark. And the other circumstance where watching this would be possibly to your advantage would be if you have a very heavy bicycle. Maybe cargo cycling, but I'm not sure. But a very heavy bicycle that is motor assisted, and you just can't find a enjoyable athletic relationship with it. Either of those cases, then watching this may be to your advantage. And if you know others that meet either of those two circumstances, then sharing it may be a good idea. Otherwise, well, don't. If you have at all a conventional weighted cycling situation, as in weight, and if you're at all satisfied with your cycling technique, then don't watch this. If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Cycling or cranking. Wow. So yesterday's video, this is a companion to say yes. For 7 years, I've been operating on the assumption that I could make this feel like cycling. And it might be that my recollection of cycling is incorrect, but in my recollection of cycling, you can feel what you're doing in the changing momentum and movement and behavior and action of the bicycle. Not only in the crank area, but in the crank area. If you push really hard, the crank is going to accelerate faster than it would if you didn't push really hard. And I have been tasking myself greedily. I want that feedback. I want to feel like that. I want that. Oh man, what a hard head. Holy smokes. It's 2,000 pounds James began to digest within the last week. It's 2,000 pounds, James. Could you swim a yacht through the water? No. Could you feel the response of the yacht to you in the water? No. Can you lift up the light pole you're going past right now? No. Does that mean that if you exert effort, you are not exerting effort? No. It means you're not getting any feedback from the object. None. But it doesn't mean there's no place you can look. You can look to your own body. You've got sensors. And in the case of cranking Saul to cranking gospel to participate? You've got sensors on the bottom of your feet. You've got sensors throughout your legs. The muscles, primarily, we're working. You've been looking for the feedback in the wrong place. Not belittling you, James. If there are articles to read on this, I haven't found them. If there are people that have seen the problem, they haven't told me, or I haven't been able to understand them, and they haven't told me. Except for a couple of nasty comments. It can't work. And maybe that's what they meant. It can't feel like a bicycle. And it can't. It can't respond like a bicycle. Not if you're frickin' Hercules. But does that mean, James, that you can't have a satisfying relationship with this? And the answer to that is, you can have a satisfying relationship with this. With this new mindset, paying attention to the cues that you do have, which are fairly reliable, your body, your feet, the sensors in your muscles, telling you whether you are adding energy, adding force, not torque, but force, power to the crank apparatus, maintaining power on the, maintaining energy on the crank apparatus, the crank arms, as sensed in your feet and sensed in your leg muscles. Yes. Nothing lost. And nothing lost in the 7 years. It was tremendous teaching, not about cycling, but about life, about myself, about where gratification comes from. A la, you can bear anything if you have meaning. And if you don't have meaning and you have to bear a lot, the alternative to suicide is continuing to look. And there's been, well, let's see, our resting heart rate is somewhere around 50. This 74-year-old stage 4 cancer survivor. I am concerned that the hundreds of logs that I've put up, mostly videos, may have led someone down on a more traditional bicycle down a rat hole. There was a comment this morning on the big YouTube video of about a week ago beginning to articulate this. This is great stuff. This is very helpful. Thank you. Was a paraphrase of the comment. It is true you cannot cycle a 2,000-pound object. It is not true that you cannot have a gratifying, meaningful relationship with a 2,000-pound object. You can. I am. Before this discovery and after this discovery. And is it now an activity that will no longer be, I'll no longer be learning about? Probably less, which is wonderful. I want to be moving this contributing to the movement of this object. Not continually learning about it. I want to achieve a sufficient level of mastery that I can just do it and enjoy doing it. Cranking, cycling, cranking. Oh my goodness. Cranking a 2,000-pound e-bike micro RV solar is objectively, infinitely more achievable, more doable than trying to cycle it. Certainly the way I remember cycling on a conventional bicycle. No exaggeration. Objectively, infinitely more doable. Infinitely more doable. Trying to get the timing and the feel of cycling, as I remember it, is largely a matter of placing the bottom of the foot obliquely to the spinning pedals, the spinning crank area, and from nanosecond to nanosecond, everything is moving, and then on a bouncing recumbent that is exerting all kinds of contrary forces on the weight of the legs. The equation is just so variable, nanosecond to nanosecond, that it would probably take AI and its own nuclear power plant to be able to do the recalculations. But cranking is inherently simple. Guess what? You can have a relatively perpendicular relationship with the crank area. You're trying to maintain energy on the pedals. And guess what? All of a sudden, the top of the feet makes sense. And because the top of the foot is held relatively perpendicular to the pedal, relatively right angle to the pedal and the axle of the crank area, just because it's what makes sense, obviously. If all we're trying to do is maintain energy fore and back on the crank arms, then feet at right angles to that, so they can grip the pedals forward and back. We use clips, by the way. It's just obvious. It's obvious. So now, rather than trying to skate or run or swim on the top of a rotating drum, we're able to operate inside the drum, which gives, there alone, double the constant feedback, top of the foot and bottom of the foot. Double the information to work with. Infinitely more predictable. Oh my goodness. And yes, in all this, James may be an important psychological study in persistent blindness, persistent stupidity, persistence certainly. There may be some sort of psychological syndrome that has enabled him to be blind so long, or it might be that what he's trying to do, as people have said recently, it's impossible. That bicycle can't work, which is to say, you can't cycle that thing. And no one has said, but you can crank it. You can have a meaningful relationship cranking it. Maybe they were withholding that information. Maybe trying to do this is so inconceivable, like the Wright brothers and those like them, flying in the air is so inconceivable, no one could think that far. And I think that's some of it, maybe most of it, but some of it certainly. But the important thing is, can you have a meaningful athletic relationship with this? Oh my goodness, this is delightful. This is so delightful. Cranking, cycling, cranking, akimbo. Oh man, what a wonderful ride. There is an akimbo, as in knees and elbows akimbo, everything askew, everything the opposite of where it should be. There is an akimbo aspect to cranking a 2,000-pound e-bike micro RV. Cyclone motors are just wonderful. They've got tremendous internal rolling resistance as they approach max RPM, and the way I have this geared, we spend all our time at approaching max RPM, probably 90%. So this thing just doesn't roll, and that's fine. Today I think we're about 60 watts per mile, which won't set any records, but boy, it works for what we do. So there's an akimbo, and it seems to happen at about a 15-degree tilt down from horizontal. So kind of out from the top of the tummy down at about 15 degrees. And it's an akimbo, that is the torque arm, the crank arm coming one way while the 3 inches back on the thigh is going the other way. And that's where they change directions as they're approaching each other, which seems, well, boy, to James, that is just so counterintuitive, because, boy, he wants everything in order, everything nice and neat, everything going in the same direction. And it's been trying to make that work for 7 years. And I don't think that can work. Nor should it. This is delightful. It's weird, but it's delightful to make sure that things stay akimbo. At the top of the stroke, that is closest to the abdomen, at the top of that 15 degrees, this end of the 15 degrees. And there's a faith in this method that if all that weight of the legs, and there's a lot of weight there, I forget what it is, but it's a lot of weight. If all that weight is being moved by us, it almost certainly is being felt by the crank arms, with some roundness to it as opposed to total jerking, and that's pretty natural. Some of the akimbo, I think, happens in a really almost shocking looseness of the ankles, fluidity of the ankles, and it's wonderful. Again, James wants to coordinate all that. He wants it under his control. And that seems to be a terrible mistake. Let it do what it's going to do, James. Let it do what it's going to do. Keep things moving akimbo. Trust in the force, James. Use the force. Oh, man. Wild. Oh, boy. These Midwest roads. Wow. Maintained once every 10 or 15 years, whether they need it or not. Oh, boy. And if you've watched this far, because you do have a impossible to move cycling situation, except for your e-bike motors, and you have found this vehicle helpful, then this video helpful, then you may wish to check my Facebook page periodically, because now, as many hours, weeks, months, years, as I continue cycling this thing around the country, this wonderful vehicle, cranking this wonderful vehicle around the country, I am quite sure that I'll be continuing to learn about this wonderful technique of cycling, of cranking, and my input, my primary sensors are the world that are the top and bottom of the inside of my shoes, not at the toe as I was thinking, I'm guessing, but more at the bottom of the arch and the top of the arch. It's more powerful, it's easy to coordinate. Spatially, it's easier to deal with. In any case, I expect we'll be learning about this technique that is just incredibly enjoyable. I don't know that it's as powerful as the mistaken attempt to cycle this thing when we've been really in a groove that we didn't understand. It is more than respectable. We're maintaining, between 80 and 95 human watts output rate per hour for a 74-year-old stage 4 cancer survivor, cranking this vehicle 3, 4, 5 hours a day, non-stop or without days in between, is certainly acceptable. And the energy output on a conventional bicycle would be double the 30 miles we're logging every day. Certainly respectable under the circumstances.